Jake Paul's found himself in the boxing space over the last few years, and he seems to think he's here to stay. But before this career, most people knew him as a Viner turned YouTuber, which is a pretty far cry from a professional fighter. So what does the fighting community think of Jake? Does anybody fancy themselves in a matchup against them? Firstly, we have Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is not a fan of Jake Paul being in the fighting space and took to Twitter to let Paul know his place. This dispute started on Twitter when Diaz replied to a tweet discussing the Jake Paul versus Ben Askren fight, in which Askren admits that Jake Paul is kinda good at boxing. This was after Askren was humiliated on stage by Paul. Diaz seemed to disagree with him though, replying with the tweet, "Coming from a retired wrestler who can't fight or box? Ouch." Paul wasn't going to take this line down though, since he clapped back with, "You have 6 times as many losses as Ben Askren." Let that sink in. This back and forth ended when Diaz replied, "He sucks, Jake. You'd get smoked in a real fight though. You can't really fight. Boxing matches with wrestlers only." Let that sink in. Seems Diaz isn't impressed by Paul's previous wins and doesn't even respect the fighters that Paul has come up against. While Diaz is still looking for his matchup, Paul prepares to fight Tommy Fury, brother of the current world heavyweight boxing champion Tyson Fury. If this fight ends well for Jake, it could be possible that we'd see him and Nate in the ring together one day. Next up, we have Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor doesn't like Jake Paul, and he's not shy about admitting it. While some people in the fighting space like what Paul does for this sport involved, Taylor claims he's not a boxer and stuff like that, but he's pretty good at trash talk. He was very hard to listen to and tolerate at times, but that's entertainment at the end of the day. Even though he isn't the biggest fan of Jake, he did praise his incredible ability to trash talk and was even present for the first press conference ahead of the Tommy Fury fight. He revealed that he was there because of an invite from Showtime Boxing. He's even chipped in discussing the upcoming Tommy Fury fight. He remarked, "I think it's quite a good fight actually." Taylor sees Fury in the same light by that assessment. He did point out that while Fury walks on stage with his family name to defend, Paul has almost no pressure other than that of his family's expectations. No doubt, even if Taylor doesn't like Paul, he'll be watching the fight next month alongside millions of fans, even if he doesn't consider Paul a serious fighter. Next on our list is Dillon Danis. While Jake may have wanted to fight Conor McGregor never returned his calls. So his next best bet would surely be his close friend and training partner, Dillon Danis. And as it turns out, the two fighters have had altercations in the past. They've been going back and forth for a very long time and recently had an altercation in the streets of LA. It's fair to say there's some bad blood between the pair. After his last victory, Jake said, "There's a long list of opponents that I want. Conor McGregor, Dillon Danis, I'm gonna knock them both out." What's more, Scott Coker, Danis' promoter, confirmed the talks of a fight when he said those conversations are ongoing and have been happening. Seems highly likely that we will see this pair in the ring together at some point very soon. The next fighter we're taking a look at is Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo is an ex-UFC champion after a shock retirement from the sport, but isn't opposed to looking at his options in the fighting world, with boxing being one of these options. Much like many other fighters, he wasn't impressed with Paul's choice of opponents and was seriously disappointed with Paul's KO over Nate Robinson in their bout. He expressed this publicly in a tweet that read, "Yo, at Jake Paul, since you really think you're a legit fighter by beating up on retired NBA D-listers who really deserve an Academy Award for best fall, how about we fight, and if I can't stop you, I'll give all money to charity of your choice." It seems Cejudo doesn't think that Paul has proven himself a boxer yet, and fancies himself as a challenger to prove whether Paul has the fight in him to win a real boxing matchup. Next up is a boxing legend, Antonio Tarver. While Antonio Tarver officially retired, he'd come out of retirement just to prove a point and to beat Jake Paul up, of course. Tarver last fight in 2015, but isn't happy that an outsider has stumbled into the ring and seems to think they're taking over the sport of boxing. Tarver spoke up publicly on Instagram when he said, "I really want to kick at Jake Paul ass for what he did to at Nate Robinson last night and rid boxing of these clowns once and for all. He fought a complete novice, so fighting me shouldn't be a problem. problem. Mike Tyson made this fight. Tarver more than made his name in boxing, and if Mike Tyson were to organize the fight itself, this fight could be a spectacle for boxing fans all over the world. It seems by his post that Tarver has been stewing over his resentment for what boxing has become and wants to be the person to come back into the ring and determine who is and isn't worthy. Up next, we have Nate Diaz again. So as it turns out, Diaz has been against Paul for a long time and has made his hatred known publicly for a long while now. This last Twitter confrontation came after Paul called McGregor a slur and disrespected his fiancée Dee Devlin publicly. Paul has been known for his trash talk for a long time, but Diaz seemed to think that this was just too far. Diaz tweeted, "Jake Paul, you need your ass beat for free, you spoiled F. You can't really fight. You're gonna end up with your ass whooped for real somewhere talking like that." Those are strong words from a fighter, and it seems Diaz has a habit of calling out Paul, so Paul tweeted at Diaz, "You can get the smoke too." He also tweeted with a link to a video of one of his sparring sessions with, "Hey, at Nate Diaz 209, I already beat your boy up, come get your mans, then you can get your smoke too." Seems Paul and Diaz just can't wait to get in the ring together. Next up, we have Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes is a two-weight UFC champion, and the UFC president Dana White jokes, "I'm thinking of letting Amanda Nunes knock his ass out." Nunes responded to this with, "I'm in," at UFC at Dana White. Paul replied in an Instagram post, "You say you don't want to fight Conor McGregor because he's one of the greatest fighters in the world, and I'm just a YouTuber or whatever. But then in a statement today you say, oh, I'm thinking about having Amanda Nunes just knock him out, but she's also one of the greatest fighters." Nunes seems to fancy herself in the matchup, but Paul isn't so impressed with the suggestion, as you can see in his Instagram post here. Dana White has made his thoughts about Jake Paul clear, and the insult that he would send him against a female fighter seemed to have got to him. Next up, we have another female fighter, Claressa Shields. Claressa Shields has already announced that she's going to debut in MMA and has already told TMZ that she'd more than welcome a mixed gender showdown against Paul. She declared, "I, Claressa Shields, will whoop Jake Paul's ass." She followed up with, "He can come in the ring weighing 180 pounds and I will come weighing 168 and I'll beat the S out of him." That's some serious fighting talk from her, and Paul is an expert in trash talk himself, so of course he had to reply in his own fashion. He tweeted, "Don't get me started about at Claressa Shields. It's almost impossible to figure out what this tweet is even supposed to mean for the potential matchup." But Shields has made it very clear that she would revel in the opportunity to fight Jake Paul. And finally, we have the infamous 6ix9ine. Jake Paul's the king of the rumor mill, so when he saw the opportunity to milk this interaction, he took it in stride. At first, he quickly refused to fight 6ix9ine, but once a fan mentioned how the rapper said he would fight Paul, he changed his tune and decided he was up for the matchup once again. Paul trolled the rapper in a video where he donned a rubber glove and said, "Get the rat traps," implying the 6ix9ine's a snitch. While Paul hasn't dispelled the idea of a boxing match, he hasn't said much else apart from the video of his trolling since. Fans still hope that the matchup will happen one day, however. So that's just a few of the many fighters who want to spar with Jake Paul. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe for more MMA content.